Hello. Hi. Good to see everyone. My name is Ben Delvin, and this is a PowerPoint I put together on lessons I learned while developing my first commercial game, DRAGOT. So, a little bit about me. I've been developing games for the past 4 years, kind of off and on. I started with just tutorials on YouTube, learning Unity, and I made a few pretty small 3D games. I made like a 2-player, 1-keyboard little ball rolling game where you have to knock each other off. And then I made a short horror puzzle game, and then I made kind of I don't even know how to describe it, like a on-rails bullet hell, like you're on a square and you have to dodge things. Yeah, so I made 3 projects, I think in about 6 months, and I learned a lot from that. And then I took probably a year off just for working and stuff. And then I started developing DRAGOT, and that took about a year and a half. And DRAGOT, I switched engines to make that project. It was made in GDevelop. GDevelop is a no-code game engine where if you look here, it's there's they call it an event system, where basically on the left are condition checks, and then on the right are actions. So if, what does that say? There, at the beginning of the scene, they hide the player hitbox, and then underneath is an event with no condition, which would just happen every frame, where it changes the position of the player to the player hitbox, I guess just to, you have the hitbox and then you move the graphic where you want it, or whatever. But yeah, it's really fast to work with. I started prototyping in that, and pretty quickly I was developing something, so I just kind of kept going with it. And that's how I started making DRAGOT. And there's an in-engine pixel art editor and a bunch of stuff. It's pretty cool. And I think there's a built-in sound effect maker type thing where you can make retro sound effects. I didn't use that for this project, but there's a lot of stuff built into the engine, so it's pretty good to get started with. What is DRAGOT? So, DRAGOT is a top-down, dungeon crawling, bullet hell roguelike where, you go through this dungeon, you fight different enemies. There's 6 different areas, a bunch of different enemy types, and if you die, you have to start all the way over. And I'm pretty proud of I don't know, has everybody played a lot of roguelikes in here? Yeah, they're pretty popular these days. But I'm pretty proud of what I did with it, because I think there's 73 items in the game, and most of them are actual mechanical changes rather than stat changes. They'll add pretty much completely new ways to play the game. Something mechanically will change about your playthrough for the rest of the run. So, yeah, and it took a year and a half to develop. It was the first game made with GDevelop to have Steam achievements. What? Yeah, amazing. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Had to mention that. Okay, so the first lesson I learned from developing this game is to embrace fun at all costs. So, a lot of the times people, when they were playtesting the game as I was making it, they would tell me oh, I feel like this item is really overpowered. But to me, that's a really good thing, because the power fantasy of you picking up, some magical item, and now you're super strong, you feel cool, you're taking out enemies left and right, I think that's just good. You know, it's whatever's more fun you should go with, as long as there's still some sort of challenge in the game. Like as long as there's still some sort of potential for you to actually reach the lose state. Barring that, you know, just make the game as fun as you possibly can. Like in a single player game, you don't really have to worry about balancing, luckily, if that makes sense. You just kind of, you know, whatever's fun, just put it in there. So, and these are some of the items you can collect throughout the game. Another thing I learned is to make sure to set up good systems early. So that's the player character. And in the game, oh yeah, I didn't mention the movement mechanic is unique in that, you know, most top-down games you move with the arrow keys and then you aim with the mouse. In DRAGOT, it's reversed. So you drag the character with the mouse. And you can basically move just as fast as you want, do whatever you want, you know, as long as it's following the mouse. Hence the name DRAGOT, you know, yeah. So in this game, if you pick up this item called the Double Bubble Bobble, it splits you into two characters. So you have two characters on the screen, and you can control both of them at the same time. Both of them take damage, both of them attack when you press the attack button, and so on. But to implement this, I kind of just said, okay, what's the first item? What's the easiest thing I can make? I'll just drag, it was an idea I had, so I just took the character and put a second one in the game. That's all I did, just two side by side, which is like, oh, this works. But now with every single other item going forward for the rest of the game, it did not work at all. It was very broken. It was very obnoxious. I really should have planned for that rather than just, you know, throwing it in there. But that was a really important lesson to learn. Also, writing code with a plan to expand. My code, I don't think it was very efficient in a lot of ways, especially when I started. And I hear, you know, some people on YouTube, they're like, oh, I'm gonna restart my whole project from scratch, but like, I don't wanna do that. So I just kept going, and I made a game, and you know, people say it's fun, but it's kind of disappointing in that from the visuals, it has like a retro pixel art style. And you would think you can run it on pretty much any system, but it's kind of, like on this laptop, I have a 1050, my graphics card, and I still get frame drops sometimes. So like if you just have like any old computer, you might lag a little bit, which is very unfortunate and my fault because I didn't have a base of efficient code, you know what I mean? So the final project, you know, doesn't perform as well as it probably should. Another thing I learned, which I think is super important, especially for my project, is to set up rules to help your creativity. And by that I mean like in big AAA games, you know, like GTA 6, whenever that comes out, they can basically do anything, like anything they put their mind to. If they want, you know, a tank to jump over a shark and like explode in a nuclear missile, you know, whatever. But for me, since I'm a solo developer and obviously I don't have those sort of resources, I kind of have to limit my scope. And a lot of times that can be really helpful in deciding what to do next. So for example, those are all the colors I used in the entire game, unless I mess up somewhere, which is impossible. There's 4 for the different player classes, and then there's, I think 12 for the different enemy types. And other than that, the game is completely black and white. So I knew after I decided to only use these colors that I could only have a certain number of enemies. You know, I knew exactly how to set up making an enemy, because I know like, okay, I've got to use this color for all the phases of the enemy types, and I can't use any other colors. This is what I have to use. So I think that helped a lot in restricting me. I think I phrased it better in the next slide, or 2 more slides. Yeah. But in restricting me, that kind of helped me to, I guess, make creative decisions easier, because there's only a few options, and I had to choose the best one within the restrictions I set for myself. Like for the enemies, as another example, every enemy has 3 phases. And starting off, most of them, they have like a small, a big, and then like a evolved phase. And they evolve through these phases as you're fighting during the game. And putting that restriction on myself also helped a lot, because I knew, okay, I want an enemy type. There's going to be 3 phases. What are the 3 phases going to be? How are they going to behave different? You know, I didn't have to think like, oh no, an enemy. What do I, you know, what, this could be anything in the entire world. You know what I mean? Like there is a set of rules that I set up and I stuck to that helped me move through the game. Also sprite outlines. Everything in the game has an outline. But then if you have these rules in place, something you can do is just break them. And then that will stand out more within the game. Like for the enemies, there's only one enemy in the game that behaves like this, but it starts as the small enemy, and then randomly it evolves into 2 of the bigger types. And that's the only one that has that sort of, that way of, you know, evolving. And that's like the hardest enemy in the game. It's in the last area. And for the sprite outlines, some of these I didn't outline on purpose. So then when you hover over them and there's that little glow effect, like this is supposed to be lightning, so it kind of looks like it's glowing. That's supposed to be sparkling. And then this, the ethereal cape, that's kind of dissolving into nothingness. And I could achieve those effects by breaking the rule that I set with the outlines to make like, you know, the lightning or the sparkles or whatever. So restrictions can help the creative process by limiting your options going forward, making game design decisions easier. Yeah, like I said earlier. And then, okay, another thing that I learned is to set up in-game systems that are fun to interact with. So like, you know, most games they have, of course they have in-game systems you have to interact with, but some can be more linear or, you know, more kind of like a sandbox, like that game Goat Simulator, for example. Me personally, I hate that game, but it's kind of the far extreme of just throwing a bunch of stuff in there, putting the player in there, and just, you know, seeing what happens. You know, they make their own fun with a bunch of, you know, different variables. So in my game, there's a soccer ball item you can pick up while going through the dungeon. And if you pick up the soccer ball item, it just spawns a soccer ball in the room that you're in for every room going forward for the rest of the game. And you can kick the ball around and like damage enemies with it a little bit, but it's pretty inefficient and it falls in holes or gets popped by spikes and stuff like this. It's like, you know, pretty boring item. I mean, it's like, it's kind of fun. It's a fun idea or whatever. But then you can get this item, which is called the Esper's Crown, which lets you drag everything in the environment as if it was your character, like kind of simulating like telekinesis in a way. So any in-game item you can drag. So now you can drag the soccer ball and you can just beat the crap out of everything in the room really fast while standing still. You don't have to do anything. And it makes that item, which was like only really fun in concept before, now you've kind of unlocked something new just by leaving these 2 things there for the player. And here's some in-game footage. The soccer ball, it used to look like an arrow. I changed it at the last second, you know. It's pretty much like that, yeah. Yeah, and then to further push on that point, something that I thought was really cool at the game day, the demo day that we had here was, I have these 3 items in the game. These are called the Hermes cleats, which basically, they make it so that you attack faster the faster you move, which is pretty fun but can cause wrist pain. So then you could get the item, this is called a broken stopwatch, and basically that makes it so that any item you pick up that would slow you down now speeds you up instead. So if you get these 2 items together, now if you stand still, you shoot like a machine gun. So somebody got those 2 things, and of course I knew about that. That was kind of like a intended mechanic. That was an intended mechanic. I thought of that before and everything. But at the game demo day, I saw something really interesting when somebody picked up those 2 items, and then they also picked up the grapple hook, which lets you click a wall, and then your character grapples to it and like flies across enemies or holes or obstacles, whatever, and is invulnerable for that time period, and it's kind of fast. And I didn't realize this, but what they did was they stood still and held the fire button, and then they kept grappling back and forth to all the walls. So technically you're not moving. And you're also invulnerable. So you can just keep going back and forth, as long as you're going to a wall, I guess is the only restriction, and just shoot at the max possible firing speed. Yeah, and I was like, oh, that's really fun. I've never thought of that. That's a really good use of that. And I discovered that here just, while somebody was demoing the game. And then this I discovered when I released the game on Steam, back to the Esper's Crown again, which lets you drag everything in the environment. This is an item called I think it's just called the totem. And it makes a totem spawn in each room. And if you stand near the totem, it buffs all your stats a little bit. And something somebody figured out, which I did not intend at all. I was thinking, okay, maybe you can drag the totem, somewhere more advantageous with the Esper's Crown. That's a smart way to use it. But they just grab the totem and the player at the same time. So you just move around the room holding the totem, and you just always have the buff, which is it's a creative use of that, and something I didn't think of. But it was really fun to see me put all these items in the game, and people just use it in completely unexpected ways that I thought was really fun. So yeah, that's back to what I was saying about giving players a playground to experiment with, and then they can kind of make their own fun in that way. Yeah, for some of it at least. Also make a good game. Or be Goat Simulator, then, yeah, so making a good game. So you want to create a robust gameplay loop. That's something that I had to figure out. Originally, I think I was going way too simple. I mean, it maybe could have still been fun, but definitely not for a full Steam release, I don't think. Like originally, the game each class didn't have different abilities, which are like, you get them one time per level up, and then you press the space bar, and then you have some big powerful spell. And there were no bosses in the game at first either. And I added those 2 things, and I was like, how did I think I was gonna make this game without these things? You know what I mean? Like, it became so crucial to the fun of the game, like the gameplay loop. I don't really know how. It would have been a lot more boring without those things. Like, as an example, Cuphead. It's a fun game, but without the parry or the dash, where you can like smack stuff back, or like the dash that just lets you, gives you a little bit more freedom of movement, I feel like the gameplay loop would be too simple. It'd be like missing something in a way. And that, like, famously, the developers of Halo, they said, if you make 30 seconds of fun, you can just keep doing that same thing over and over and over. If you just make this really fun gameplay loop for at least 30 seconds, you can put that in different contexts, move the enemies around, change up the enemy variety, different things like this, and then you can just make that into a full game. And this is an unrelated picture of my game, DRAGOT, that I developed. Another thing I learned, kind of like building off that point, countering it, is to make sure you don't fall victim to scope creep. So start creating something that you think you can finish and commit to finishing it. Don't keep adding more and more and more. Like don't make things too simple, but don't overcomplicate them. You know what I mean? And if you need to, you can even, decide you want to build a game, and then maybe if you want to add another feature, but you're not sure if you can do it, just build what you already decided to make, and then see if you can add that on after. Like have a, what do they call that? Minimum viable product, I think is what they call that. Yeah. Because the number one thing stopping game developers, especially solo developers, is just losing motivation on their projects. That's why most people don't finish. And that's gonna happen a lot more if you keep deciding to add more and more new things. You're just gonna become overwhelmed and kind of give up, So I think it's important to establish a good gameplay loop and kind of stick to that. Like a game design document or something like that helps a lot, but for me, I just kind of winged it. So that's why this became my process. Ideally, I guess you could just decide everything at the start, and that would be cool. So for me, something that became really important in my game was to keep raising the stakes. Like, basically, I didn't want the beginning of the game to feel anything like the end of the game. And, I guess that sounds pretty obvious, but, like, I think the biggest thing that helped me in doing that is having a lot of enemy variety. Like, the basic enemy in the game is like a little, rat that just moves around and shoots in random directions. And I could make a bigger version that has more health, or a faster version that does more damage or whatever. But I think it was really important for my game to make just completely different enemy types that don't behave anything like each other, so that every time you're in a different room, it feels like, not that you're playing a different game, but like, there's a different, I guess here I said texture to the game. Like you have to move differently, think differently, fight differently. And that's because, the mechanics can vary so much from room to room. Yeah, I wanted the game to become more chaotic the farther and farther you got. So this is some footage. I think it's 3 rooms. The first 3 rooms, just me clearing that. I recorded this like a couple days ago. That's an item that makes like lightning strike. So that's just me clearing the first 3 rooms of the game. And I moved pretty fast through it, but it's pretty basic. You fight the little rat enemies, you pick up new items that can help you later, get your first few levels. But if you compare that to the end of the game, where I started recording and I was already poisoned, so it's going well. long it's gonna feel standing up here. These ghost enemies, they turn invisible unless they're near those lamps. And they also possess like the furniture in the room, and then start shooting at you. So that's why I kept going to the door thinking I had killed them all, and then I couldn't leave. So yeah, that's like late game, as it were. So, as you can see, there's tons of like, a bunch of different things happening at once, like different status effects, fire everywhere, like 5 different enemy types. Those purple little eyeball looking things, they can go through walls, and if they shoot you, you become confused, which you guys probably noticed, is very debilitating. Yeah, so I really wanted to make sure that the late game felt way different than the early game. And I think most of how I did that was, of course, the items. That's where like the roguelike mechanics come in. But just making a lot of enemy variety. And then, like with the environments too, like this haunted mansion type area is a lot different than the dungeon you start out in. And while I was trying to record this clip, this like 30 seconds of gameplay, I kept trying to record it over and over, and I was like, no, like this isn't good. This isn't a good showcase of the gameplay. Like this is, I get caught on a table here, or like I went to the door and tried to leave, but there were still enemies. It doesn't look as cool as it could. And I think that in that case, I really just had to choose something and go forward with it, because I was being a perfectionist. You guys saw that transition. Perfectionism is something I really struggled with a lot when making this game and, previous games before, because, I want my exact vision to come to life. I want it to be perfect, you know what I mean? I want to, it to be like, wow, this is crazy. But at the end of the day, especially because I'm a solo developer, like I did everything myself, I'm not always going to be able to reach that goal. I'm gonna have to make compromises along the way, and just make certain changes, here and there. So yeah, I wrote to have a high standard. Don't compromise your vision. If there's something you really want in the game, then just keep trying to figure it out. But sometimes you're gonna have to let it be fun and finished rather than try to make it perfect and just never release the game. You know what I mean? Because if I wanted there to be no glitches, I could have waited another year and just done play testing and just tested it over and over. Or if I wanted the pixel art to be like a Da Vinci painting, I could have started studying and put something together that's really crazy. But I just wanted to make something that I could really be proud of and release it so other people could play. And that's what I said right here. Because for me personally, and I think probably most of you will feel this way, it's not good to get caught up on one project forever, because you as a developer have to be bigger than any one project. You know what I mean? Like I plan to release other games, further down the line, multiple other games. DRAGOT is something I'm proud of and something that, I'll probably always look back on it and even play time to time. I've actually been playing it a lot more recently to try to get the speedrun world record. I don't have it yet, but I'm gonna have to move past it and move on to other things. So I can't, I want people to play it, so I have to release it, if that makes sense. Yeah, and like I was saying, make sure you're willing to compromise on some of your ideas. Not just even from a technical standpoint, but sometimes even from a game design standpoint. Like originally, when I came up with the idea for DRAGOT, there's a dragon that chases you throughout all of the rooms. If you take too long, it shows up and it's unkillable, and it's really strong, and you have to get out as fast as possible. Originally, that was going to be an ally, and I came up with a bunch of ideas for like mechanics of like, oh, you can get different eggs and it makes it grow stronger and stuff like this. But I realized I wanted the game to be fast-paced, and I didn't want to have to program so much dragon AI. So I realized it would be a much better fit if the dragon was your enemy that pursues you through all of the levels, rather than like an ally that helps you all the time. And that can be annoying anyway. I put an ally type thing in the game, and people hate it. It's like one of the lowest items on the tier list. Oh, the tier list, wow. I really put this thing together. So another thing I learned that was super important is to listen to player feedback, super important. Here's a tier list of all the items in the game. I didn't make this, I think the current world record holder for the speedrun made this tier list. Soon to be ex-world record holder. And I noticed, from his and a few others, that there were items that were always F, always on the bottom. Like there's always the worst items. This is kind of old. I've added a few more items since this tier list was made. But these right here, all the way on that side of F, they're called the Flint Sole Boots. And basically, especially towards the beginning of the game when I was making items, I wanted items to have a positive and a negative. So the positive to the Flint Sole Boots is that you leave fires behind you wherever you're running. So they can burn enemies that are chasing you. The negative is you leave fires underneath you wherever you're running that burn yourself. My idea was like, okay, you have to keep moving, just keep going, don't stop. People hate that, and it's not even very good at killing enemies. I was really stubborn about this though. I really wanted you to have to keep running from this fire the whole way, and nobody liked it. And I realized I should just listen to the player feedback, and this would be like a C tier item, you know what I mean? So I switched up the effect, and it still makes you spawn fires underneath your feet, but it also makes you immune to fire going forward for the rest of the game. So now it's like a pretty good item, and it also buffs this other item right next to it, which creates fires all around you every time you get hit. I don't know why I was so obsessed with the fire on you, but it makes that a little bit better too. And then that's the malfunctioning droid, which is the item I was just describing that everybody hates, because it comes into each room with you and fights with you, but half the time it fights against you instead. So, maybe I've buffed it since then, it's better now. Yeah, people didn't like that. People got very annoyed at that one. But yeah, I think it was really important in that case listening to player feedback. Another big thing that really improved the game that came from what the players said is basically there's a floor texture in every room of the game. And some of them are more obtrusive than others, especially in the forest area. There was a bunch of grass, and it's very bright, and there'll be small projectiles flying over it, and then people were complaining they couldn't really see. And I was like, what do I do about this? Because me personally, I can see, and I like it a little bit brighter, and I've heard different things. And then I realized, I came up with the genius idea to add in the settings a floor opacity option. So if you turn it down, then the floor gets like darker, more gray. So you can see better if you want, and you can kind of customize the game in that way. And that was super easy to add, and I think it improved the game a lot. And that came just from listening to what playtesters had to say. Even if you can't get a lot of playtesters, I probably had like 3 or 4. But it can be super helpful, because you playing the game will be like, you'll be like the best in the world. And then if somebody else will get on the game and be like, why is this so hard and terrible, you know? So it's really important to get playtesting and to listen to player feedback, super important. Ignore player feedback. Never listen to them. That's a joke. But there are times where it's really important to try to address what the playtesters are saying, but maybe not follow their directions exactly, which is something I realized when it came to the pause menu of the game and the restart button being there instead of a resume button. I did it like that on purpose because you have to click any of those buttons in the menu and you have to click the character. So if you pause the game and then you click the menu, as soon as you unpause, your character will be like over here and you'll have to scramble to pick them back up. So thinking about that ahead of time, I was like, well, that's very inconvenient and probably will trip people up a lot. So I'll just make it so that you can only pause and unpause with the escape key. So you can still, you can unpause already dragging your character, basically. And there's no downtime where you could be getting hit by other things. But people kept thinking that the restart said resume anyway, and they just kept clicking it. And then they would lose their whole run because, it's a roguelike, and it would be very upsetting, understandably. And it wasn't just one person, like multiple people, they kept clicking this restart button thinking it was gonna unpause their game, and it did not. So what I ended up doing, instead of putting a resume button there, like people were suggesting, I made it so when you click restart, it asks you, are you sure you want to restart? Or in this game, it just said, like you click it and then it says restart ? And then you click it again. So you basically have to you have to commit to doing it. And then people started complaining about the back to menu button. I don't even know why. Why are you? What was the goal? Why are you pressing that? I don't know. That's just your own fault. But I added the same thing to the back to menu button. And then another thing where it's very important sometimes where you have to ignore player feedback, I learned, is in regards to the difficulty of my game. It can be pretty hard, especially if you're first starting out. And a lot of the time when play testers first started playing the game, they're like, this is too hard, this is too hard, this is too hard. And I would be playing and I'd be like, I don't know, I feel like this is balanced pretty well. So there was this one time I updated the game and I changed a bunch of things and I sent it back and let people play it again. And 2 or 3 different people said to me, thanks for making the game easier. But I didn't change the difficulty at all. I was like, oh, yeah, you're welcome. They just played the game and got better, which is exactly what I wanted them to do. And that was my goal the whole time. So I was like, yeah, you're welcome. I did it. So sometimes it can be really important to not ignore their feedback, but don't listen to what they're trying to tell you to do. Listen to what they're saying, but don't take their suggestions. The important part is why they're saying what they're saying, not what their actual complaint is. That's why these Steam reviews where people just put checklists of their opinion, it's like, well, why do I care? I don't know you. Why do I care that you think the gameplay is very good or that it's for adults? I don't even know why that's a category. I want to know your reasoning for why you hold an opinion or why, when it comes to playtesters, why it's affecting them in this way. That's the real important part, not their actual opinion. You have to read between the lines sometimes. But the Steam reviews where they post funny pictures, that's valid. That's cool. I'm with that all day. Okay, so connections and collaboration. As a solo dev, I don't know if most of you are interested in doing a project all on your own, but as a solo dev, very few people can do everything. I felt like I could do most things like adequately, but not everything. And most indie devs use assets at some point, I didn't use any assets. I think that's probably something I should look at in the future, like get over wanting to make everything myself. But I think that like most indie devs, they use, art assets. I guess I use sound effects. I didn't make sound effects. I'm not a Foley artist. I don't know how to do that. But yeah, so you have to know your strengths and weaknesses. Like me, I can't make music at all. I've considered maybe experimenting with it a little bit, trying to make some music for my games, but I've never been able to do that. And it's kind of like a whole nother art form that I'm just not confident in at all. So I had to figure out some way around that. This is actually my attempt at making music for the first time. And that's enough of that. We don't actually need to hear that, any more of that. But this is the music, this is some of the music that's in the final game. And the way I got such a good soundtrack, like I love the music in my game, I'm really proud of it. And what I did was basically just look around. This is the soundtrack for the caves area. It's one of my favorites. I just looked around on a bunch of websites, looking for different like copyright-free songs and stuff like this. It was very exhausting because there's not gonna be anything that, usually will fit your game exactly. I actually got the music from the trailer from a copyright-free website, just like completely royalty-free. And I kind of made the trailer around it, and it kind of like sort of fit to the point I was satisfied, but there was no way I was gonna do the whole soundtrack like that. So one day I was on Reddit and I saw somebody make a post that just said, I wanna make music for a game. And I was like, oh, okay, I have a game, I need music. And I started talking to this person, and they were a composer from Germany that basically didn't have any experience. And we started talking for a while, and I said I needed a few tracks for my game, and we just decided to collaborate, and we came out with a really great soundtrack that I'm really proud of. Like, sometimes I listen to the songs just like cuz, like, like it's Beyonce or something. Yeah, I couldn't have had that if I was too prideful to, reach out and try to collaborate with somebody. And even then, I got super lucky. Like, it's honestly a weird twist of fate, and something that I'm really grateful for, because the music is really great and it fits the game really well. And just me on my own, I was like, maybe I should just have ambient noise. I don't know, like crickets, literal crickets in the graveyard segment. But I didn't have to have that. So that turned out really well. Sound effects. Sound effects are super important for any game. It's super important to invest into finding good sound effects for your game. Not just because, obviously it makes it so that it's not completely silent like this room. But you can tell the player something without them having to visually see it. Like, for example, in my game, it became really important that I had different sound effects because when you kill all the enemies in the room, the door to the next room opens. But sometimes it's kind of hard in the heat of the moment, especially if you're trying to go fast, to know, did I get all the enemies? Is the door open? Is the door closed? So I made a different sound effect for each area, like a distinct door opening noise for each area that fit kind of like the theme. So when you hear it, even if a lot of stuff is going on, even if the music is loud, okay, I can go to the next room now. And I did the same thing with all the enemy types in the game. Like, all of them have a different death noise that that specific enemy makes. And some of the items the player has too. They have specific noises that let you know, like, oh, my ice item just froze somebody or whatever. And like, it's to the point where, like, if I closed my eyes and I heard somebody playing through a different part of the game, I could probably determine about where they were, you know, in the game, like what their progress was. So I think that is super, super important. I mean, sound effects are important, that's obvious, but like, you know, use them to their full extent, you know, is super important as well. So another thing I learned was to use my time wisely. Right before I released the game, I spent like many hours in crunch mode writing like a whole backstory and lore and like for all the characters in the game. And I hid it behind the achievements in the game you have to get. And I'm pretty sure nobody has ever read any of this stuff. And I actually put a lot of work into this. I don't know why. Like, here's an example of one for if you get the achievement Bright, which you get by turning on a lamp. It's a pun. Would anybody like to do like a dramatic reading of this? Oh, okay, he's coming up.
I have to read that small from here, so I'll just have to go to the computer.
Oh, okay,
Sorry.
What's your name?
Gabriel.
Gabriel.
So, are we going for like a mysterious type of mood, or are we going for more bold?
I'm giving you creative freedom, but I think like a little bit of both.
All right. Maybe the mage stumbled upon this knowledge while reading one day. Maybe they heard a rumor in the halls. Then again, it could have been just a fable from when they were a child. In any case, they could never quite stop thinking about it. For all their studies of magic, for all their learning, there was one thing they couldn't let go of. At the very top of the tallest tower, at the very throat of the world, there the last dragon of lightning lived, holding fast to its most precious treasure, the knowledge of how to control the sky.
Thank you. Very beautiful. If only people could read it like that when they play, or read it at all. But that's why you should spend your time wisely, especially if you have some sort of deadline coming up, like I did when I decided, oh, let's increase the scope of this lore thing. What do I put in these text boxes? Oh, I'll just write a whole 5 short stories. Yeah. So another thing that I noticed, and something that is really important to me as a player as well, is I think players really appreciate extra effort you put into the game. Like small things that aren't necessary or aren't expected, like, you know, something that maybe even doesn't even, like, it doesn't have anything to do with the actual gameplay. Like, as an example here, for the main menu of my game, I made it kind of like a screensaver, basically, with the enemies just sitting behind the menu, and they just walk around and do their enemy things. But it changes for every time you play to the last area that you got to in your previous run. So right here is, you know, just the first one, the dungeon. And then here is if you get to the Haunted Mansion area, which was in that second gameplay clip I showed. It changes every time you go back to the main menu. And I think stuff like that is really important because I think people notice like that little bit of extra passion, you know what I mean? Like the extra effort. Because I didn't have to do that and it doesn't really change anything. But I just thought it was really cool. So, you know, I wanted to do that. And when you first start the game, it's just like a black screen. So it's a surprise. So when you guys go home and buy the game, forget I said any of that. And other examples of that are like there's an item in the game called the Ouroboros ring. And basically what it does is every time you kill an enemy, you have a higher chance to critically strike in the future. But if your chance to critically strike hits 100%, then it loops back to 0. So kind of throughout the game, if you pick up this item, you'll be doing much more damage kind of in waves as you kill more enemies, and it'll loop back on itself over and over. So I decided to put a little indicator around your player, like 2 small little things that represent like an Ouroboros, like the item basically, eating itself, and then it resets back to 0. And this circle basically, it gets bigger as your crit rate goes up, and if it hits 100 and resets to 0, it disappears. But that only shows up if you have that item, which is just like a little detail that a few people told me was really cool, that, you know, I didn't necessarily have to add. It didn't really affect anything too much. It was just a little cool visual. And as one last example of that, for these 3 items, the footwear items, there's the Hermes cleats that I talked about earlier. You know, you move faster, you attack faster. And then there's the lead line boots, which make it so that when you walk, it sends out shock waves. So I made it so these 2 combo together. If you have both of them, you send out shock waves faster the faster you move. So if you start just moving around really fast, you know, a bunch of shock waves come out like all at once basically. And then to go even further with that, this 3rd item, the flint sole boots, the infamous flint sole boots that make it so that you set fire to the ground as you walk. Now they make it so that you set fire to enemies that get hit with the shock wave. So if you have all 3 of these random items together, and there's 73 items in the game, so most likely, you know, most players will never see this, then you kind of have this weird way to play where you just drag your character around and, you know, burn everything with these shock waves. And I tried to add a lot of little item interactions like that throughout the game. Like there's tons. I think there's probably some that nobody have ever noticed before. But just, you know, if you get these random items, they sort of work together and do interesting things. And, you know, I didn't have to, I guess the point is I didn't have to take it that deep. So yeah, that's where like the extra effort came in that way. So yeah, so just general advice, I guess. And I guess I did learn this a lot from DRAGOT, especially with the demo day and, you know, sending it to people. I think you shouldn't be afraid to put yourself out there, you know. It's really fun to be creative, and I think people really appreciate passion if you put it into your development or whatever artistic thing you're interested in. You know, I think somebody will end up really appreciating it. And it doesn't even have to make sense at all. Like, most of my items in my game and like the lore and everything about it, like, it doesn't really make sense. It's kind of just stuff I thought was cool or fun, and I just wanted to throw it in there, and people ended up really appreciating it. And I think that's what creativity allows you to do, like, especially game development. Like, you could get really abstract, just do whatever you want. Like, for example, I know this is cliche, but like Mario, the biggest franchise in the entire world, it doesn't make any sense. Like, he eats the mushrooms and he gets bigger. Okay, I don't know what that's about. But he also fights mushrooms. But he also talks to mushrooms and lives among them, and he's friends with them. And then he rides a dinosaur, but he fights a dinosaur. You know what I mean? Like, what is the relevance of any of this? It doesn't make any sense at all. But it became the biggest gaming franchise in the entire world. So I think really just letting yourself be creative and putting yourself out there is super important. And I think if you're passionate about it, then people will respect it and enjoy it. What's the deal? He eats these. This one talks. This one he fights it. He doesn't even know what's going on. You know what I mean? I mean, like if this can be the biggest gaming franchise in the world, you know, maybe, yeah. Speaks for itself. Marketing. This I don't really know much about. Probably there's, you know, go to a different talk. But I do know some things. If you want sales, you definitely need marketing. It's super important. Like marketing, honestly, for the games industry can probably be more important than actually making a good game a lot of the time. Because, you know, if you make the best game in the world and nobody knows about it, then nothing's going to happen. It doesn't really matter at all. Yeah, but if you make, you know, as we've seen time and time again, like a mediocre game, but you market it really, really well, somebody's going to buy it. And especially with marketing, I think you get out what you put in. Like for me, I hate trying to market myself. I don't really like that. I just want to like be creative and make a game. And yeah, I didn't really market much. Like I posted a few things on Reddit, like in some Discord servers, but like, I don't know, like, what am I supposed to buy ads? I don't really know. I don't know anything about marketing. It's very difficult. I think people with money probably hire other people to do that. But yeah, I don't have any sort of budget really. Like I did everything for free. So yeah. So at this point in the talk, I wanted to show you guys how my game performed, like the financials and stuff like that. And I took a screenshot of like the Steam financial report, but then I was thinking like, oh, I think this is behind like a confidentiality agreement. Like I don't know if this is legal per se, to just show this. So I put it in a deep fried meme. And I'm, you know, what are they gonna say? You know what I mean? This is fair use right here. But basically, you can see kind of next to the money with the wings and the Shutterstock watermark, this graph right here, that's sales of my game as of last year. I think it stops at December. And this is revenue, but basically for my purposes, they're the exact same graph. So you can see I released my game at the end of October with basically no marketing at all. And that's where I got like probably almost half my sales. Like day one, mostly friends and family and stuff, and a few others bought the game. I think I probably got like 20 or 25 sales just off that first day. And then it sort of trickled off. There was like half that the next day, and then these little spikes next to the flat parts is like one sale. So that's, you know, not too bad, you know, it's something. It wasn't my goal to make this financially successful anyway. I just, you know, it's my hobby, I'm passionate about it, and I just wanted, you know, I wanted something up on the storefront that I've used for so long, you know, ever since I was really young, buying and playing games. And I accomplished that, and I made something really fun that I can be proud of. So I don't really care too much about the financials, you know, maybe one day eventually that could be nice. But if you can't see that, but it says like $429, something like that. That was the money that the game brought in. And I was kind of excited because I was like, oh wow, that's not that bad. Like they'll send me a check. But that's actually before taxes and Steam takes their cut. So I ended up probably making half that, yeah, around half. And Steam doesn't send you your money unless you have more than $100 in your account. So I think I got paid like...
Did they give you Steam credit instead for other games you can buy on Steam?
I don't know. I haven't, yeah, that would be nice. I would just spend that. But yeah, I probably made like under $200, maybe like 250 from this game, which is like, you know, that's fine with me. I'm pretty happy that people have bought it and played it and had fun with it. That's what's most important to me. But like, if you are a solo dev and you develop something and you release it on Steam and you don't market your game, watch out. Cowabunga, you know, this is what's gonna come for you. Yeah. So.
Are you doing any social media or?
No, I don't have any social media. Yeah, I should. Yeah, that makes sense. That's probably a good idea. And then, yeah, the final lesson I learned is if somebody offers to let you do a talk, do it. Even if you're nervous, you know? Put yourself out there. Yeah, so I really appreciate you, John, and everybody for the opportunity. But yeah, are there any questions? I don't know how long that took. Oh, about an hour.
I was going to say, the pizza came, so if somebody wanted to grab a slice of pizza while we're doing the question.
Yeah. I need some pizza too. But yeah, does anybody have any questions or anything? Also, buy and review the game. Yeah. I need more reviews.
Yeah, that definitely helps.
Yeah.
Do you have any other hurdles when it comes to releasing the game onto Steam? Just in terms of like literally having the file and putting it on there?
Yeah, actually that would have been a really good subject for a slide. Because yeah, there are significant hurdles to that. So I could probably pull up my Steam store page. So for Steam, when you publish a game, you need a bunch of pictures, at least, like to fill up all these slots. And you need a description, you need header art, you need basically a bunch of promotional material that you'll have to make specifically for Steam, to specific dimensions, and a bunch of different things like that. And you'll, if you're me, have to learn how to edit and spend 2 days with no sleep putting together a trailer. Yeah. Because you also need a trailer. I think technically...
To help sell it that way?
Yeah, for sure. Trailers are super important. I think technically you might be able to have a Steam store page with no trailer, but I think that's probably ill-advised. Take it from me, you know, it's like #1 hit bestseller, as you've seen. But yeah, just all of that, like assets for when it's showing in your library. You need, I mean, I guess you could call it seed money. You need $100 to post something onto Steam. And they will give you your $100 back if you make $1,000 in profit. I'm pretty certain. So for me, I'm never gonna get my $100 back, but
business cost.
Yeah. So, and Steam achievements, you know, you gotta define all of that. Their website, it's not the most complicated thing. There was a couple times I got kind of confused, and you can't really make guides about it because it's all supposed to be confidential. But yeah, there was one time the day after I released the game where I tried to update it and the whole game went down for everybody for like 8 hours, which was really terrible and stressful, but I fixed that. Yeah, you will have to put some effort in. It's not the worst thing ever though. Like if you've developed the whole game, you probably have a pretty good idea of, you know, everything that should go on there. But that's the obstacles there for the most part.
Was there a review process?
Yeah, it was like 3 days, and they said I'm good. I don't know exactly what that entails. Did you have?
Yeah, is that how they come up with the system requirements, or do you have to figure that out yourself?
You have to post that yourself too.
Okay.
Yeah, here, system requirements. I put the minimum, the specs of this laptop. I don't really know, but you know. And the recommended, yeah, I don't know. I put something.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, they will. You do that for yourself. Pretty much everything you.
So, just quickly, from my understanding with Steam Review, they're basically just making sure that you're advertising what you're actually putting out.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
what they're doing.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And they're also just checking, because I know this because a friend told me that they had accidentally done this. They're also checking to make sure you don't have like a Patreon link or something like that to buy through Patreon.
Yeah.
They realized this because they accidentally added one later. And then they realized, oh wait, we're not supposed to do that. So they had to go back and remove it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, but I think that's pretty much the obstacles for that. It's doable, even if it can be kind of confusing sometimes. And nothing is automatic too. Like if there's a sale, you have to define the discount you want. If you want a discount, every single time. If there's an event, you have to register beforehand and say, can I take part in this? And then probably like a few months in advance, they'll tell you. And you have to do all of that yourself.
Since we're in the QA section, I think, when you have to deal with like, if something is adding to your scope, do you have a rule of thumb, a personal rule of thumb that you like check if like, this is what I had in my original thing versus adding something more than you thought you would need?
Not one that I've really vocalized, but maybe I could say, if I think of an idea and I can no longer imagine the game without it, then I would probably work to put it in some form, no matter what. If like I realize, oh, this game could be so much better if I just did this, I don't think I can really let that opportunity. I wouldn't normally leave that on the table. But as far as like, if I'll put like a fishing mini game in last second, probably shouldn't do that.
So you use GDevelop, which I've never heard of before.
Yeah, it's pretty
And you mentioned you switched to GDevelop, so why? What was the rationale there, and were you happy with that decision? What were the advantages, and did you have any like drawbacks that you didn't anticipate?
Yeah, I guess the main reason was I wanted to do something 2D, and I knew there were other engines that you could do that in besides Unity that maybe specialized in it more. Unity is kind of a mess in my opinion. Like, there's just so much, like all the features, half of it doesn't make sense. Like you have to, like I always think you have to add an extension to make it so that your text can be a normal resolution. Otherwise it's blurry. Like, isn't that crazy? Like, you can't even do that in Unity. So yeah, it's kind of just like, I didn't know if Unity was the best engine for me. Honestly, I don't think it's the best engine for most people, but if you like it, you should use it. But yeah, I was trying to learn Godot a little bit, and there was a big learning curve. And it's not like object-oriented, it's scene-oriented, which is it was kind of confusing to me at the time. So then I saw somebody try this engine out on YouTube, and it seemed really simple and fast to work with, and I tried, and it really was. So yeah, like as soon as I decided, I was thinking like, what engine should I make the game in? I already had a good foundation in GDevelop after like a few days. Whereas in Unity, I would have been like, oh God, how do I code this? I don't know. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think it was a good switch for me for now. I do want to move back into 3D at some point, so I'll probably learn something else. GDevelop does have 3D features, but they're really minimal and basic. Like you can make like a Doom clone. That's pretty much it. Yeah, I think it worked out well for me, and I think it's pretty easy to learn and like fun to use. Maybe not the best for people who are really into coding, who want to set up their systems really in depth, because you use like actions for pretty much everything, of which there's only a preset amount. It's pretty like wide. You can do a lot with it. I never really ran into too many problems, but maybe not the best for some people. Does that answer your question?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you, actually, so I have a follow-up question.
Mhm.
So do you, like, have any, like, background coding, or, like, what's your
No,
background, like, coming into that?
I did a few.
Visual scripting thing?
Yeah, I just did a few like YouTube tutorials. I kind of taught myself C# for Unity, at least to the extent where I could make a few games, and then I just went from there. So I don't really have any coding background. Just a lot of tutorials, like classes. Like there's that one free online class, or there's lectures from Harvard. What is it called? CS50.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can watch those for like the basics of programming and stuff. I went through that some, and then I started developing games. Now I'm in school for computer science though, but that hasn't really intersected with game development at all at this point.
Sure.
Yeah. Did somebody over here?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was wondering what kind of influenced some of the, I guess, overarching or broader design decisions of the game. So you mentioned like wanting the ability to have like pros and cons.
Mm.
You mentioned that you want the game to feel different around the end compared to the beginning. Like
Yeah.
what kind of influenced you to come to those decisions?
I guess there's some game design decisions where I can point to specific influences, but as far as the pros and cons of having different items, there's a lot of items like that in DRAGOT. I feel like it was probably inspired by some other roguelikes that had sort of similar items, maybe like a few items from like, I know like the roguelikes that really inspired me were like Risk of Rain, a bunch of others that I can't think of. A lot of people compare this game to The Binding of Isaac, which like it does have some similarities with, but I never liked the controls of that game. And as far as like wanting it to feel much different later in the game as compared to the early game, I think I just thought that would be epic. I don't know. I don't know that anything specifically inspired that, but some specific inspirations I had were like the dragon chasing you through every level to kind of make sure that you're not, going really slow or like farming XP or something. There's this game called Wasted, and it's like Fallout. But just the dungeon crawling, and if it was like a roguelike.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really fun.
I was in like Mr. Pedunkian that he made it. I was in his IRC channel like years ago
Whoa.
when he was developing that, and I got
Whoa.
to play early build of it.
That's so crazy. What? That's really weird. I just mentioned that to you.
Yeah.
What a coincidence. That's really cool. Yeah, that's a really fun game. And I had some other example in my head, but I can't think of it. But yeah, hopefully that answers your question somewhat.
Oh, where did the core idea of moving the character with the mouse come from?
I had a dream where that was happening. I don't know.
It came from your subconscious.
Yeah, it did. I don't know. Actually, a lot of my game ideas just come from dreams. Like I wake up and I have to write it down really fast. The original concept for this was like, it was supposed to be like Gauntlet, but you move the character with your mouse. Yeah. So, and then I just started making it.
Cool.
Yeah. Did one of this question?
I was going to ask about the items, which, first off, I'm impressed by the black and white bits on those.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that.
And then also, I was going to ask, because you have 72 of them, you said?
70, yeah, there's 72 and then one secret item. Yeah, well, nobody knows what it does yet, like literally nobody. Some people have been like, what is this? I'm like, telling you. And what, yeah, 72.
Sorry, yeah, 72 in a secret. You mentioned like some specific combinations and such. And I was just wondering if you had a method that worked for you with playtesting those and like getting your combos to make sure they work together. That would be a lot of different potential combinations.
Yeah, well, I mean, saying 72 items and then there's item combinations sounds like a lot, but not every item specifically changes when used with a different item. Like sometimes they kind of just work. Like there's one item where it splits, if you're a ranged character, it splits your attacks into 3 different attacks that go forward. And then there's another item that makes it so that if you attack forward, you also attack backward. And I didn't really have to do anything. It kind of just worked out so that if you pick up both of those, now you attack 6 times, forward and backwards. So sometimes I got lucky like that. But other times, I really had to change a lot of code and basically write specific if statements that are like, okay, if you have this, do this. But if you have both of these things, do something completely different. And it was very tedious and annoying. But luckily, most of the items, like if you were to pick up any one item, it doesn't necessarily combo with all of the 70 other items. Probably just like 5 to 10 where I really had to change something. And sometimes, it just works. But yeah, there's not really a good method. It was just tedious.
You mentioned you had you mentioned some of your initial buyers and players were friends and family. Do you know where the rest of your players came from?
There's some Steam stats on that, based on country. Most of my sales are from the US, in which case I know definitely, probably somebody I know, or, it could just be somebody anywhere else, but if they're outside the country, I know it's probably somebody I don't know. And I think some spread throughout Europe, like a couple in Brazil, Turkey, I think was the highest after the U.S. Oddly enough, I don't know.
Well, I guess I was wondering how they found your game. Do you know how they?
Probably from, I would have to guess, probably just from my one-off Reddit posts and Discord posts, and just trying to mention it in any online space I'm in, which is not many. Some mysterious way through the internet, I'm not really sure. Yeah, but I guess I know a little bit about it, not too much. Yeah. Don't take marketing advice from me though. I don't know if it'll go well. Are there any other questions?
So about the Steam achievements, is that do you have to work with the Steam API or something? How does
Yeah, you do. And actually, I don't know how to do that. So I think it's probably a little annoying to fiddle with. But very luckily, right before I released my game, the GDevelop team released an extension that has support for Steam achievements. So I was just like, okay, cool. Right before. It was very convenient because I had already made all the icons for all the achievements and listed them all out. That you could unlock them in-game and see the lore that was locked behind them, everything like that. I just needed to sync it with Steam. And I was stressing, how do I do this? And then luckily, they just made a feature. So, yeah. But yeah, you do have to work with Steam's API. I don't know exactly specifically how to do it.
So you mentioned you collaborated with a musician.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm wondering, what did you do in terms of working out the rights for all of that? Did you bring in a lawyer? Did you
No.
sign contracts?
Yeah, I'm not that official. It was like a spit in your hand and shake deal. Yeah. So, I guess, I don't know the legality of that. She's in Germany, but I guess one day if she was ever hey, I don't want you to have this music, I don't know. If I would have to take it out or...
Did you pay her up front?
Or have a revenue share?
Something like that. I can't disclose that at this time. But she's very talented. If anybody wants to work with her, you guys have to pay her. And I can send her info in the Discord too, because she's very talented and looking for work. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know about the legality of it all.
Usually just at the basis, like if I wrote music for somebody else, like it's considered a work for hire, especially if they pay me $1. It's like by default, more than likely they would own the music. It's just that I might ask for certain rights, like, hey, can I release a soundtrack?
Yeah.
Can I like put it on my streaming page or whatever, things like that.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, that makes sense.
it's kind of understood.
Yeah. She has the soundtrack up on her like SoundCloud, and I offered to make like a DLC to let people buy the soundtrack and then just give her 100% of that, but she said no. She said it's just hassle. So, yeah. So whatever he said is my answer. And make sure to attend the talk.
Yeah. I'll put a little bit, I know, yeah. But most of the stuff I've done has just been the same way. It's like, it's more just like an understanding, or just a simple email, like, we'll own this, you will get this. Okay, cool me. Hey man, alright, let's get to work. You know,
Yeah.
like, it's not me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, AAA is completely different.
Yeah, for sure.
I feel like for a lot of indie stuff, you could use. I'm also in film, and so there are a lot of like crew, like very basic, pre-written crew contracts that you could find on the internet. I can't remember what website right now. I'll look it up, and if you want to like if you want what the information, let me know, and I can put it in Discord or something. But there is a website that gives out pre-written crew contracts, and you could use that to like change some of the language and have a actually
Something.
contract to work with.
Yeah, that's what I did with my game for all my contracts. I just downloaded templates from Rami Ismail had made a site a long time ago called Do Contract that has like game development related ones, and it has like drop downs so you can change certain things in the text. And then I just downloaded one of those and edited it to fit whoever I'm sending it to.
Oh, cool. Yeah. And for the trailer music, which she did not write or create in any way, I found this is just like I was on a copyright-free website. What's the copyright status? There's one like
Creative Commons.
Creative Commons.
Yeah. Where you don't have to credit anybody, you can just use it in whatever way you want. I just made absolutely sure it was that, and then I used that in the trailer. Which I think it came out pretty well. I kind of tried to edit around the music. But yeah, that's the story behind that. And it's way too loud. I did not mix that in any way, shape, or form. It's super loud. So if you go to the Steam store page at home, like take your headphones off. It's just fair warning. Sandy?
I know you talked about this game before, but I just thought of something. Like when you first created the game, like what makes you think of the concept of knights and other creatures and all that stuff?
I think I've just always really been into like the sort of high fantasy aesthetic, like knights, mages, paladins, stuff like that. I've always thought was really, really cool back from like Zelda Link to the Past and like the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. I don't know, I just really like that aesthetic, I guess, that sort of vibe, like the Knights of the Round Table and Merlin. Yeah, and then for the enemies, the rat and the spider, those were also in the dream that I had. This is a secret recipe to everything. Just have a dream about it. And then, I don't know, I kind of just like, oh, what should I make next? Like a tree enemy? I don't know. I just kind of kept rolling with it. Yeah. So, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Real quick, I did not, maybe I'm just dumb for this, but I did not get the mouse pun. What what is the mouse pun with the name of the game?
Oh, you drag the character with your mouse. Yeah, my bad. Yeah.
Got it.
I probably did say it very well. You drag the character with your mouse, and it also kind of sounds like drag in, and there's a dragon chasing you, and it sounds cool. So, yeah. That's how I named that.
Did you figure, did you have the name for the, did you have the name, or when did you figure out the name of the thing? Was that like later in the development or earlier?
It was a little bit later. It's probably like halfway through development. I came up with that name, and then I came up with the logo over the next couple days. Yeah, it just kind of hit me halfway through. I didn't really have a good plan for a name. Naming things is hard. But yeah. Does anybody else have any questions? Okay.
Okay.